Protesters flee from rubber bullets after a day of huge protests in Catalonia. Anti-austerity protests engulfed Lebanon for a second day. The last straw was a proposal to tax WhatsApp calls. And Mexico's president says lives are more important than a criminal as he backs the decision to release El Chapo's son. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, and this is From the South. More demonstrations have erupted in Chile with student protesters facing violent police repression. Police have militarized the metro after students flooded the subway, protesting a recent hike in bus and metro fares, jumped turnstiles. The violence started late in the afternoon. Protesters were sent running for safety when police fired rubber bullets into the crowd near the Barcelona police headquarters. Some demonstrators were beaten with batons. Earlier in the day, a huge rally saw an estimated 500,000 protesters gathered in the center of Barcelona for what they called a March for Freedom. Protesters were heard chanting freedom for political prisoners as they waved their flags. Some of the marchers began their trek on Wednesday from municipalities across Catalonia. This was the 5th day of mass protests against the jail sentences handed out to 9 independence leaders. Protesters also blocked traffic on 2 routes connecting Spain and France as the general strike got underway across Catalonia. The protesters set up barricades on the AP7 motorway at La Jonquera near the city of Girona in eastern Spain, as well as on the N11 road near the border. The Spanish Prime Minister said that violent protests would not be tolerated.
La regla es muy clara.
The rule is very clear. Those who commit illegal acts must be held accountable. The sooner the better, but they must be held responsible. Have no doubt about that. There will be no room for impunity for the acts of vandalism we have seen in recent days in some parts of Catalonia.
Activists in Catalonia have just posted this tweet calling for international help. They say that Barcelona is now a military zone with dozens of vans in the streets to crush today's massive demands for a democratic referendum. There are dozens of injured tonight and 301 in the last 4 days. Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad Hariri has given his coalition partners a 72-hour deadline to back key reforms as protests against austerity measures continue to rock the country. In the capital, Beirut, protesters threw plastic bottles at the police, who responded with tear gas. This is the second day of protests against the government's plan to impose new taxes on fuel, tobacco, and social media platforms. In the southern city of Sidon, protesters blocked the main highway and burned tires outside the home of Lebanese parliament speaker. The nationwide protests, Lebanon's biggest in years, brought ordinary people from all sectors and walks of life to the streets, carrying banners and chanting slogans calling on the government to resign.
We want the downfall of the regime, all the way from the top of the pyramid, because one person only cannot live while the rest remain, because we are hungry, because we are dying, because we are tired. They have no conscience. There isn't a single thing. There is nothing.
And in the northern city of Tripoli, protesters also burned tires to block the roads. The government has now withdrawn its unpopular proposal to tax WhatsApp calls, but the protesters say the whole political system and its economic policies are rotten.
We are here with one voice to demand a solution from the parliament to hold elections and for all these politicians to leave. We're fed up with the degrading, disgusting situation. We don't have any work, electricity, water, pension funds. No decent living standards exist here or anywhere else in Lebanon. These people did not take to the streets to cause riots or chaos. They took to the streets to express their pain and suffering caused by this political situation that's been going on for 3 years.
The protesters also accused the governing elite of corruption. The Prime Minister told his fractious coalition they needed to fix things fast.
Either our partners in the coalition government give a precise and final answer that convinces me, the Lebanese people, the international community, and all those expressing anger on the streets today, that there will be a decision from the government members to begin reforms and to stop government waste and corruption, or I will have a different message to share. A very short time limit, and this should be clear for everyone. And if you were wondering how long is this short time limit, it's 72 hours.
Guyana's President David Granger will head to Cuba on Saturday as he continues to receive cancer treatment. He disclosed this on the sidelines of the accreditation ceremony for Germany's first woman ambassador to the country on Thursday. President Granger told reporters that every 90 days he has to go to Havana for a checkup. Last year, he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma and has undergone several rounds of radiotherapy treatment. Doctors had reportedly given him the all clear in July. Meanwhile, the 77-year-old is expected to lead his party into the March 2020 regional and general elections. Staying in Guyana, the country's opposition People's Progressive Party is yet to select a prime ministerial candidate for the March 2020 general elections. Ex-Army Chief Mark Phillips was tipped to fill the position. However, opposition leader Barrett Jagdeo has shut down those claims. He says Phillips has not been selected as running mate for the party's presidential candidate, Irfan Ali. Jagdeo says nominations for the number 2 spot on the opposition party's slate will be decided at the end of November.
We are not going to be engaged with no party or individual in trading positions. You know, you're only coming in because of this or that. And Mark Phillips said, I want to be part. I like the vision, I like the program for the country. He's a patriot too, and he wants to be part of the team. When we come to selecting the prime ministerial candidate, the names are going to come up, we'll have a discussion, and then we'll make a selection. But it's not dependent, him being part of the team is not dependent on that.
Dozens of people gathered outside the U.S. Embassy in Haiti to protest against the country's support for the Jovenel Moïse administration. The protesters, including leaders of various opposition parties, accused the U.S. government of interfering in Haiti's internal affairs. They have since demanded that the White House respects Haiti's right to self-determination and allow its citizens to decide their own destiny.
It's the Americans who are keeping President Jovenel Moïse in power. I cannot take the long road to denounce this, but instead I came here directly so the world can see us and we can bring the news, to tell them that it's the U.S. Embassy that is keeping President Jovenel Moïse in power.
Residents are bracing for a possible eruption of the Piparo mud volcano in Trinidad and Tobago after heightened seismic activity was recently detected at the site. The country's main disaster agency reportedly met with persons who live near the volcano to discuss possible relocation. Geoscientists say recent seismic tests showed significant changes and heightened activity at the central vent over the past week. Last month, residents heard rumblings and explosions at night, then awoke to see fissures and cracks around the area. Several homes suffered extensive damage. The mud volcano last erupted in 1997, displacing dozens of families and killing livestock and birds. Resident Melissa Matura is on the ground in her hometown of Piparo and provides this update.
And we're here in Piparo, where residents living near the Piparo mud volcano in South Trinidad have been informed that there is heightened activity at the site. The relevant agencies have met with people in the area and alerted them. There is an evacuation plan in place, but so far communities near the site have not been given any instruction to leave their homes, at least not yet.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, protests rock Honduras as the president's brother has been found guilty of drug smuggling. Join us for details in a minute. Welcome back. Police in the Mexican city of Culiacan have been forced to free a son of the jailed drug leader Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. This after gunmen from the Sinaloa cartel launched an intense assault on security forces who had detained him. Fierce gun battles broke out between police and the gunmen in the city on Thursday afternoon after news spread that a police patrol had detained Ovidio Guzman. Videos posted on social media showed images of heavily armed gunmen roaming the city in pickup trucks. While as more gunmen from the Sinaloa cartel headed towards the city, the police said they were outnumbered and freed El Chapo's son in order to pacify the city. El Chapo is currently serving a life sentence in the United States, but Culiacan was for many years the base of the Sinaloa cartel, which he built into the most powerful drug trafficking organization in the world. During the clashes, more than 30 inmates escaped from the city's Aguaruto prison. Residents said the prisoners were going to fight for the cartel. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said he supported the security officials in the decision to release El Chapo's son.
Y tomaron decisiones.
They took decisions which I backed, which I endorsed, because the situation was very difficult and the lives of many citizens, of many human beings, were at risk. And they decided to protect those lives. And I agree with that. We don't want massacres. That is over. Catching a criminal can't be more important than people's lives. They took that decision, and I support it.
Muchas personas, muchos seres humanos.
This Friday, a court in New York found Tony Hernandez, the brother of the president of Honduras, guilty of drug smuggling. But testimony given in the case suggested that other members of the Honduran governing elite could be implicated, including the president himself.
After learning that various witness statements in the case against Antonio Hernandez pointed to some government officials, Honduras started taking to the street to demand an investigation into and punishment of the leaders involved.
They have embarrassed the country and have reduced Honduras to their own backyard. They want to continue looting and committing crimes shielded by amendments to the criminal code.
This comment comes as the National Anti-Corruption Council warns that members of the Hernandez government are preparing a law which will consider offering impunity to persons who participate in organized crime.
The proposed criminal code will grant impunity to those identified, as well as to people who've already been sentenced on corruption charges, meaning they can appeal. If this criminal code goes into effect, they can hide behind it, and that would be terrible.
Civil society organizations who have taken to the streets are calling for the government to step down, as it has been an accomplice to organized crime.
The problem that we have is that there are no state powers. We have a judicial system that is unable to execute justice under the existing legislation.
Economists have said that if there is no change to the government structure, the country's financial crisis will worsen.
There is a real impact to this country's global image. Investors won't want to put their capital in a country governed by drug dealers and criminals, because ultimately they want legal security.
Opposition sectors have said that protests will increase once the judgment is handed to President Juan Orlando Hernandez's brother. Antonio Hernandez is accused of drug trafficking on a large scale, arms trafficking, and giving false testimony.
In some breaking news from Chile, the government has declared a state of security as the police crack down on protests over subway fares. Student protesters faced violent police repression, and several have been injured as they refused to pay fares. The protesters flooded the subway and jumped turnstiles, protesting a recent hike in bus and metro fares. Videos show police wrestling and beating student protesters to the ground. There are also reports of the police firing tear gas in the central station. Shifting gears now, Colombia will be holding regional elections on October 27th, but the campaign has been marked by violence on a scale not seen in recent years.
With just a week to go before regional elections in Colombia, the organization Peace and Reconciliation has presented a detailed analysis of electoral violence across the country in the period from October the 27th, 2018 to October the 11th this year.
Today we have 230 victims, of which 22 are murderers. The rest are attacks, threats, and other kinds of violence. This is double of what we saw in the 2015 elections. Another aspect is that it's not just one ideology or political party that is being attacked. Most of the victims are from the opposition coalition led by Colombia Humana and the Green Party, but the ruling coalition led by the Democratic Center has also been attacked. The traditional parties are the ones that have the fewest victims.
The report points out that there are several kinds of killers involved. 80% of the incidents are carried out by unknown hired gunmen, while the other 20% are carried out by paramilitary groups, ELN guerrillas and FARC dissidents. The violence has affected at least 28 of Colombia's 32 departments.
The violence is concentrated mainly in 5 departments: La Guajira, Cauca Valley, Cauca, Tolima, and Antioquia. This tells us that there is no simple correlation between electoral violence and areas abandoned by the FARC. Because in the north of the Cauca Valley, for example, there was no presence of the FARC, yet it is one of the main focuses of violence this year.
The situation has become worse as the regional elections approach on October the 27th. Attacks and intimidation against candidates are increasing. A week ago, there were attacks on the headquarters of left-wing parties in Bogotá, where security should be tighter.
We don't have any clear information about who was responsible. We know that this place is extremely well protected. So, we are very concerned about how it was possible for them, in the center of Teusaquillo, to carry on an attack on the headquarters of the Communist Party and the Patriotic Union 8 blocks away, and 10 or 15 minutes later to get into our offices. And absolutely nothing happens to them, and no one is arrested.
The political coalition of the left in Colombia is demanding urgent guarantees for its political activity. And since the investigations have made no progress, they assume the security services are not taking action. They're requesting the presence of the European Union and the OAS at the elections to ensure that they can take part in peace.
Bolivia prepares for its presidential election on Sunday. So let's take a look at how women have won recognition of their rights in the last decade.
The new Constitution of 2009, a product of a constituent assembly, opened the doors to state recognition of women's rights and demands.
The state's political constitution created an opportunity to advance within the legal framework. Specific laws on women's rights, such as the integral law to ensure women's life freedom from violence, the law against human trafficking and smuggling, Law 243 against political harassment and violence, are an example of that.
Up until a decade ago, in this country, women were restricted from owning land in rural areas.
When President Evo Morales came to power, only 15% of the land titles were in the name of women. Today, 46% of agrarian titles are held by women.
All of these changes have been experienced and felt by campesino women themselves.
This never happened with previous governments. For example, that an indigenous woman, for example, I am Quechua, could be seen in parliament or similar positions.
We're empowering women. Now it's 50-50. We now have women and assembly members, as councillors, as deputies.
It really is a process of change. That is why we say now that we have the same rights as men.
With this process, Bolivia has been recognized throughout the world and by international organizations.
Bolivia is the third country in the world with the greatest political participation of women after Rwanda and Cuba. But not only because they are women, but because they have a lot of voice with a lot of decision-making power, both in the lower house and in the upper house.
The recognition and exercise of women's rights in society is affirmed and has been an important investment for the short term.
Beyond the fact that political participation is a right, the fact that there are women visible but also with strong voices make girls dream that they too can go far and that they too can reach that in the future.
The new and advanced legislation, according to experts and women's rights activists, is not enough, but it is a step towards demanding the full implementation and exercise of these rights and reducing gender-based violence.
Coming up, flooding in Ivory Coast has killed at least 5 people. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has threatened to restart the operation against Kurdish forces in Syria next Tuesday if they do not withdraw from his designated safe zone. On Thursday, Turkey agreed to suspend its offensive in northern Syria for 5 days while Kurdish fighters pull out from the area.
If the United States keeps its promise to us by Tuesday night, at the end of 120 hours, the issue of the safe area will have been resolved. But if this promise is not fulfilled without any exception, the minute this time is up, the operation Source of Peace will resume where it stopped, and with even more determination.
In the Turkish border town of Akçakale, residents have shared their thoughts on the ceasefire agreement. The Turkish military offensive has left hundreds killed and injured, with more than 160,000 people having to flee.
We were forced to leave our villages because of the offense. They forced a demographic change that affected Turkmen minorities. They burned our homes and they took our lands. Now we are happy and hopeful with the entrance of the Turkish military and the Syrian National Army to our lands to liberate us from this gang.
At least 5 people have died and hundreds forced to leave their homes due to severe flooding in Abidjan and several cities in Ivory Coast. This as a result of torrential rains, which led to many roads being blocked and sinkholes forming beneath some streets. Emergency agencies and the armed forces have continued the search for more casualties as the heavy rains persist. More than 100 people have been rescued and are in shelters.
The water got into the houses. We started putting things away a little bit. We couldn't save much. A lot of things have been left in the house. We have lost a lot of things. We were only able to get the children's clothes out and some for ourselves because given the water level, we couldn't get much out.
Kenya has rolled out a nationwide campaign to vaccinate girls against the human papillomavirus, or HPV, that is linked to some types of cancer. According to the Health Ministry, the vaccine will be given to 10-year-olds through public, private and faith-based health facilities. Last year, the ministry reported that over 3,200 women died of cervical cancer, with a total of 5,250 cases. Kenya is the 16th African country to embark on such a program. For our last story, Cuba's best-known ballet dancer Alicia Alonso has died at age 98. Co-founder of the Cuban School of Ballet, Alonso received countless awards, among them the National Dance Prize in Cuba and the Gold Medal of the Circle of Fine Arts of Madrid. Alonso was acknowledged by leaders around the world during her artistic career. So we leave you with more of the great Alicia Alonso in honor of her dedication to the world of arts. Until next time. News.